I was 12 when Poltergeist 3 came out. And although I wasn't initially aware of the problems throughout the production until much later on, I really enjoyed it. I have very fond memories of seeing it all the time on cable. How do you get involved in that project, and was it difficult or intimidating for you to write and direct the three-road movie knowing that you were following up two successful films? First of all, I was approached to do Poltergeist 2 for Brian Gibson. And for several reasons, I didn't do it. I had just written a pilot for NBC. And the pilot got picked up for production and I had already committed to directing it. And also, I felt that the budget for 2 was a little overinflated for what it needed to be. There were a lot of people involved in the production and there was a lot of money being spent on the production that wasn't going to end up on the screen. And that's always been a real major thing for me. When I make a movie, I want the money on the screen. I don't want the money going into lining the pockets of all kinds of people, including myself. I think the idea is to take that money and give that money to your audience. And not keep that money for yourself. That's the way I've always been with all my productions. So, anyway, it just didn't work out when it came to part 2. Vice Squad had been out there already and it was a film that had gotten a lot of attention from other directors. I can't tell you the number of directors that contacted me after Vice Squad and just started talking to me about what a significant film it was. It was really mind-boggling for me, but also humbling to get calls from Walter Hill and John Milius and Martin Scorsese. Laughs. John Milius had told me how he sat and watched it with Steven Spielberg and supposedly that's how my name got brought up for Poltergeist 2. This is second-hand information, but that's what I'd heard. I wasn't available for it, so it just didn't work out. But when they decided to do Poltergeist 3, they came to me first before they went to anyone else and said, "Would you like to do Poltergeist 3 and would you like to produce it, write it and direct it?" The producers of Deathline were at that time running MGM. And I had a long-standing relationship with them, so I said okay. I had just done Wanted, Dead or Alive with Rutger Hauer and they loved it. So, that's what I ended up doing. It started out to be a lot of fun to do Poltergeist 3 and I'd sold them on the idea that this was going to be the last film ever made that has no CGI in it. Not only no CGI, but I didn't want any opticals in the movie. I wanted no film tricks at all. I told them I think I can do the whole movie as a magic show and do every effect live on camera. I watch it and am baffled by the visual effects in the movie. Especially a lot of the tricks with the mirrors. Did you use pretty much everything you had learned on previous films about visual effects in Poltergeist 3? I used not only what I learned from my films, but I have a master's in photography and I went to a technical school, so you had to take scientific courses as well, so I studied physics in college. Optics were always a big thing for me. Another thing, while working my way through school, I not only did it by being a session musician, but I also got myself a job at an optical laboratory once I got interested in film and learned how to use a lot of techniques that we don't use anymore. All the tricks that were used to do special effects before CGI came along, which included manipulating film and using blue screen. I had a background in that and I loved doing that stuff. And my career in commercials was really based on special effects because I used to do all kinds of special effects commercials. I loved the idea of doing long tracking shots and really manipulating the camera. I brought all of those things together to do Poltergeist 3. It was a film I was really excited about making until Heather O'Rourke died. Carol Annett's The Great Unfinished Film. I don't think anything could be more significant to a director than the film that he lost a star on. It must have been so difficult. I had read a bit of the backstory on the production. And I had read that you and a lot of the people involved in the film didn't even want to complete it once Heather passed away. I didn't want to complete it at that point. I mean, I loved that little girl. She was just so special. If I could have adopted her, I would have. If she could have been my kid, I would have absolutely loved it. She was just an amazing person and the sweetest little thing you could believe. When she died, I was in shock. I was a pallbearer at her funeral and it was probably the worst day of my entire life. There was never a sadder moment in my life than that day. You know, it was hard. I didn't care about the film anymore. The studio said let's just bury the film. How can you release a film with a dead 12-year-old in it anyways? I think it's awful. And we don't have an ending. There's no ending shot. At the beginning, everyone agreed with me that we shouldn't try to finish the film. And then pressure from the board at MGM changed that. They pretty much said you finish the film, or someone else will. And I wasn't about to throw my footage over to someone else. So, I wrote that little bullshit scene that now ends the movie. And we shot that little 2-second scene with a double. And the camera going back up through the window and the lightning striking the top of the building, and it's just a bullshit ending. I hate it. And the rest of the movie, even after we shot that ending, the film was too short. So, I had to go back in and stretch and use scenes in the film that I had never intended on using. There are scenes that I wrote because the studio felt I need to elaborate on certain things. And I knew those scenes would never end up in the finished films. And unfortunately they did, because I had to stretch the length of the film. I think I got 77 or 78 minutes out of the first cut, and so, in order to bring it up to its delivery requirements, I had to just keep stretching. So, we stretched anywhere we could. Even on that 77-minute version, we had stretched the opening titles for as long as you could possibly bear to have the opening titles go. For what it's worth, I saw it at 12 and I loved it back then for the visuals and it left an impression on me. So, I hope that's worth something. Laughs. Well, thank you. Laughs. It's my least favorite of all my movies. In fact, I don't think I've seen it since I made it. I remember every frame of it. I don't think I've seen it since it was released in the theater. I have the DVD but I've never watched it. I've let other people watch it, but I have not watched it. I don't even know what the transfer on the DVD looks like. Mainly it's an emotional thing. I can't watch that film and think about directing Heather and losing her. It's pretty awful to lose someone. We lost Jack Albertson right after Dead and Buried, and Donald Pleasance is gone now. It's kind of strange watching films of people who were your friends and knowing that they're gone. But when there are pleasant memories connected to it, it's a lot easier. Because of the fact of the way she died, it just was not pleasant. It was a terrible tragedy. It was. And I think she would have gone on to be a great director. Seriously. At 12 years old, she knew more about filmmaking than a lot of people that are out there making films today. That's what she wanted to do. That was her goal. She was going to stop acting, because she wanted to direct. She wanted to go to film school. And I think the world lost a really good filmmaker. I would assume that experience turned you off from filmmaking for a while? Well, I had done Lisa right after, which was another horror story. The making of Lisa was the worst production nightmare I've ever gone through. And even after the productions of the film, the release of the picture was an even bigger nightmare. I don't want to go into all, but it was horrible. I did one film where my star died and the next film where the studio died while I was making the film. So, there was no money to release the film once the film was finished. And they forced me into doing stuff that I didn't want to do. I really felt like slave labor on that film. Because they had taken the project I was very close to and a script that I really loved, and they turned it into a piece of shit. And then didn't release it properly. And that's really why I decided to take a hiatus. I had had my fill. Television had been very, very good to me over the years, so I just left the world of feature films and went back to producing television. Gary, I'm so sorry. I feel like I should apologize to you. Laughs. It's okay.